Hello and welcome back to the Power of the Truth podcast. I'm Fran and today's guest is someone I connected with almost instantly, both fully woo and a bit nerdy about the science behind it too. Today, my guest Lisa Barwise is a wellness alchemist, fitness feminist and author of Unarmored. Lisa hit what she calls her edge of the bed moment a couple of years ago, the kind where you swing your legs around to get up and your body simply says no. Underneath that moment was years of compounding weight, a narcissistic friendship with someone who was supposed to be like a sister to her, grief she hadn't properly processed, and an organisation she was part of that turned out to be a cult. We talk about what she calls Armour Weight, the invisible load that so many women carry without realising it, the friendship that nearly broke her in ways nobody warns you about because we talk so much about narcissistic relationships, whether that's partners or parents, but so little about narcissistic friendships. And we talk about what it actually takes to unarmor yourself and come out of the other side lighter, stronger, and more you. So this is an honest and raw in places conversation. We touch on some taboo subjects, and it's a really interesting point of view that she has. And it might just help you name something that you've been carrying too. So here is my conversation with Lisa Barwise. Okay, welcome to the Power of the Truth podcast. Lisa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, for the benefit of my listeners, would you please tell us who you are?
Well, I call myself a wellness alchemist and fitness feminist. And that's a really cool way of saying that I believe in the power of both psychology, biology, and spirituality coming together, and also with the big FU to the patriarchy on top of it. That's pretty much it. I am a blend of all of those things where woo-woo meets nerdy science, and it's all about, for me, seeing the woman as a whole. So I work alongside midlife women in this transitional, I call it a reawakening stage. And I do that through, I've actually been in this space now nearly 20 years in different guises, right? I've tick all the boxes of qualifications that you can think of in the wellness space, from personal trainer, and I'm a kettlebell instructor, and I'm a nutritionist, and I'm plant-based, and I do meditation, and I'm a somatic therapist. And I do tick all the boxes. But if you were to ask me and you were to cut me open and say what is inside, I believe it's this goo of wellness alchemy, this blending of what I think is true mind, body, spirit, but really where that woo-woo and the nerdy science come together to help and support women to be whole and come back to themselves and feel like they're at home again.
Yeah, it's amazing working. We need it. So we really need it because so many people go through these huge, big life changes, and we spend a lot of our younger life, I think, looking for a relationship to complete us because we're told that's what we have to do. We're women, we're girls, we have to get married, have babies, and to have a career, obviously, as well, because now we have to be
everything and have it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And so somewhere along the way, and I know because of the women I work with too, that the mind, body and soul thing gets disconnected, doesn't it?
Totally.
And we come out of alignment. And so, yeah, such important work and so aligned with what my beliefs as well, which I love. So when we spoke, we had a little chemistry call, didn't we? Get to know each other a bit. And you mentioned to me about hitting a really dark place. You called it your edge of the bed moment.
Yeah.
Can you take me back there and describe what that felt like, please?
Yes. So I think it's a moment that we all have. It might not necessarily always be at your edge of the bed, but a lot of us know what that feeling's like, right? For me, it's always first thing when I wake up. So in that moment, I'd swung my legs around, ready to stand up. And sometimes my head's in my hands. In this case, I was trying to hold on because when I went to stand up, my legs just gave out, right? It was literally one of those moments of, not today. No, you can't keep doing this. And the thought or the question that came to my mind was, can I really keep pushing on? Can I really keep carrying on like this? This carrying on, this pushing on that we do as women, right? We're really stubborn. That's what we've been taught to do. What is it? Keep calm and carry on. But in that moment, I had that that thought of like, but what if I can't? Like, what does that look like a week from now, a month from now, a couple of months from now when I keep pushing and keep going on? Because in this moment, I can't explain the heaviness that I felt. I literally felt like all of my limbs were filled with lead, but yet I was also just hollow, like I was hollowed out. I was so tired that I felt literally that I was moving through treacle, like I was just, or moving through pudding. Somebody described it the other day, and I was like, yes, it just feels like that. And my legs hurt. I was exhausted. I wasn't sleeping. I had heart palpitations, all of these things. And this was someone who, by this stage, I had been in the wellness industry for like, I don't know, 12, 13 years. So I wasn't ignorant or unaware of health challenges, but I wasn't, even with all the boxes that I would tick, like, hello, health coach, hello, personal trainer. And I was exercising and I was eating well and I was doing all of those things. But what I realized in that moment was that there was something else I didn't know. There was something else at play here. And even though I could say the words of perimenopause and how stress affects us and all of these things, this was my moment where I was like, holy shit, this is it. There's something going on. And I don't like to use the word broken because I don't think that's what we are. I think it's like there's something wrong or something's not right or I'm
Well,
out of balance or I'm out
you
of.
weren't well, were you?
It
You
just
weren't
wasn't
well.
well. Right.
And then ironically, working in the space that you do, and you were doing all the things, but you weren't well.
Yeah,
And
I wasn't in alignment, which I think is your great word, right? Because if you looked at the biology, right, I was doing the nutrition stuff really well. I was doing the movement stuff really well, but yet my hormones were all, yeah, right? But then that's to be expected. Hello, deep in perimenopause. But there was something else that wasn't, right? How was I spiritually? I was so disconnected from myself and from the practices that I would have done regularly. If we looked at the psychology of it, I was in a dark place. Like my anxiety was so intense with bouts of depression. A lot of stuff had been going on in my family life in terms of a breakup from a narcissistic friendship, like a sister friendship, from late diagnosis ADHD, from what I believe really truly was CPTSD that we all went through with COVID, but we never processed that. We never really processed the effect that all of that had on us. And again, depends on how we went through COVID because people have different experiences of that. But I also had unresolved grief in there. I lost two people during that time for different reasons. I also had what turned out to be anemia, but wasn't 100% knowing of that. What I knew, I had a gluten intolerance, but it really, really messed with my gut to the point where I just wasn't absorbing all these wonderful nutrients and supplements and everything else that I was giving to it. So all of that just meant exactly what you said. I was just so out of alignment, so off kilter, not in balance. And although some of the boxes were being ticked from a wellness point of view, hello, taking my green drinks, doing my hot girl walks, doing all of these things, I was still having this edge of the bed moment of I'm not right. This is not right. Right. And how bad can it get? Because that's the other thing. Like at age 22, I'd lost both of my parents to degenerative diseases that could have been avoided through lifestyle and nutrition changes. And here's my son about to turn 20 back then. Actually, he was about to turn 19 at that time. And I'm like, that's not far off where I was, right? And he could be in the same place. So that's where the darkness was, right? That's the I suppose the wellness rock bottom that I had kind of hit. And that's what it felt like.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that we do this thing where something happens and we go, okay, that was really horrible, but I'll just keep going. I'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And we mask and we put on this face and we go, yeah, I'm good. Don't worry. Yeah, don't worry about me. No, I'm good. Are you okay? I'm fine. Everyone just carries on. And these things keep happening and they pile up and they layer up and they compound and they press everything down. And then we get to midlife and we realize we don't have to say yes to everything anymore. We suddenly get our like the hormones kick in and start make us being a bit more bullshit and a bit more.
Yeah.
And I know I've had that irrational rage myself for sure. And it is irrational because I know I'm doing it and I can't control it. But equally, then it all comes out.
Yes.
Then I'm no holds barred, you know.
And it's exactly how you've described it is what I put words to, because when I was trying to describe it to others, and again, me being the health geeky nerd that I am, I was like, okay, as I'm going through this process, and I suppose it was a healing journey, though I think that that's such a cliche thing to say, but my healing journey, but it was. And I thought, right, and I didn't think I'm going to document this, like I'm going to write everything down. I was like, I know I'm the type of person that works better, as we do being healers and people of service, that once I've gone through this and I've been able to help myself, I want to be able to talk about it, right? I want to be able to share this as a story. And I was talking about it with someone, and I came up with this thought of, it's like I'm putting on armor. I had to wear armor, the war paint that you put on every day, to a mask, right? To feel like you're fine, everything is okay. And then maybe you'd even wear certain clothes that give you that sense of like, I used to make jokes about suiting up because I love superheroes and things to do with that, right? So suiting up, right? And then I was like, no, it's not even like that. Because it's so heavy, it's definitely like armor, right? It's like armor weight. It's like this barrier that we've had to put on every time, as you say, something happens, somebody has passed away that was important to me. That's okay. I'll be fine. I'll keep going. Piece of armor. We go through a really tough time. We do make it through the other end, but we don't want to look back and dissect what happened there. Nope, another piece of armor, right? And then there's all of that just gets laid on. And as you say, that's what makes us so heavy. But also, if we're carrying all of that, how are we being effective in anything else that we do? Like, how are we being good parents? How are we being good partners? How are we even being good children to our parents that probably need us during this time? How can we go out in the world and try to help and serve other people if we're just so heavy and laid upon, right? And I think that is the crux of why I called it Armour Weight, and I've defined that. So I define Armour Weight as the emotional, the energetic, and indeed ancestral, that's where it gets really fun, weight that we carry as an effect of being women in midlife, right? It's the accumulation of all of those things. So it may be a physical representation. It could be that, like somebody you said to me once, you look like somebody that's really put together, but I suspect there's something else going on there. And I'd be like, wow, I'm getting like psychologically analyzed by somebody because I'm so put together, but like busted at the same time. But there's something about that. Or the woman who really struggles, even in midlife, to lose that extra bit of weight that we hold around our midsections because of maybe they went through a bad divorce or a bad breakup and they don't want to be attractive to anybody. So this is their defense mechanism, all the way to maybe they did or have been the victim of sexual abuse, and this is their way of keeping them safe because, again, they don't want to stand out. They don't want to be seen. This is the way that they're going to protect themselves from that. So in a lot of ways, it can manifest as a physical weight that we carry. It can manifest as stress weight because, again, we are biologically here talking about the stress and the cortisol and all this sort of hormonal stuff, but also energetically, right, that we're carrying from unresolved grief, unresolved trauma, whether it's big T or little t, or just things that we haven't even had the time or desire to sit and process. And that's what it feels like, carrying that heavy ass armor everywhere you go.
Yeah, you're completely right. And I don't think we talk about it. I think it's difficult for our generation specifically because our parents were boomers and they were, put up and shut up. You don't
put up and shut up
emotions. We don't tell. We don't want the neighbors to know what's going on. So we've been brought up with the stiff upper lip, put up and shut up attitude. We've then produced children who are millennials and Gen Z and
so in touch with their feelings and have boundaries like there's no tomorrow, like no boundaries.
But I'm so glad they're brilliant at setting boundaries. But yeah, it's a challenge. But it is difficult because we're that in-between generation bridging that gap. And there's no wonder that we're struggling because we've inherited this, we've just got to get on with it attitude.
Got to get on. Just to get on. Yeah.
Especially for people like you and I, because I know you're a doer, as am I.
Yes.
So it's just get on with it, get the job done. Don't be flaky. Just,
Yeah.
And then at some point, there's like a crash.
There's a crash. One of the phrases that I loved so much in one of my books is, women may have stopped being burnt at the stake, but now we're just burning out.
Yeah.
And that's it. We replaced one way of burning to the other, right? Because that emotional exhaustion, that burnout, which is what that is, burnout is emotional exhaustion. If you look at the stats and the studies of that, it's incredible. I did just a survey just of my own list, and 70 to 80% of women were saying, yes, emotional burnout, that's exactly where I'm at. I can't give anymore. I can't. It's not even human doings. We're human givers, right? We just give, we give, we give, we give. And that's why we're also one of the most unwell generations at this point, moving into menopause. There's a lot of studies, for example, that edge of the bed moment, that was my body saying no, right? And in the book, Gabriel Mate's book, The Body Says No, it's very much like you need to listen to your body. Now, none of us did up until that point, because if we did, we would never have got anything done. We would never have been able to make things, push things, or hustle culture and all of these sorts of things. But now we're paying the price. Now there's a cost. And the cost is a shocking menopausal journey a lot of the time. That's what I'm finding. Women are really struggling going through this very natural phase of their lives, to anything from autoimmune diseases, which are affecting mostly women, to divorce being a really big one in this middle-age time, to even as far as, yes, more of the scarier degenerative diseases, but also suicide rates, depression, right? All of those things as well. So we're paying the price. We're seeing the cost of that. And I think a lot of us are beginning to go, okay, I need to take stock. I need to think about this a little bit more.
I do think our generation struggles, men and women actually, because obviously we're talking about women because that's our thing. But I do think it's difficult for men too, because they're told they have to work, they have to be the breadwinners. We want more money than we've ever wanted, ever, because we want to copy all this celebrity lifestyle and have nice things and big houses, because that's the validation that we've been sold through social media means you're a really successful person. Your children want everything instantly, but it all has to be names and labels and everything. And yet they've got to be present for the children. They've got to be at home. They've got to be good dads. And don't get me wrong, I do think women pick up a lot of the slack. There's no doubt about that. But I do think it's hit the men hard, that as well.
Well, also because the balance shifted the other way during the time where, because again, I mapped out in my feminist journey, how this all happened, right? How the women started to come into the workplace. And it was exactly what you've said. The man's salary alone wasn't enough. So what they tried to say was, oh, let's bring equality in the workplace. But what they actually said was, we actually need two incomes to even be able to make the household work and actually have enough disposable income for the things that they wanted to sell us to buy. And that was capitalism, right? So then the women had to be like, okay, well, now I need to do it all. But yes, we didn't look at the shift of what that also did to the man, because if the man proves his value, his sense of self from being provider, from being the protector, from all of those things, and yet women are going, well, I'm actually doing okay providing over here. In fact, I'm doing okay with these other things as well. His identity and his energy becomes very difficult. Then there's this extra wave of, well, who does marriage actually serve in the long run? So then men are starting to go like, hold on, well, if I have to say that marriage is, I get a woman who looks after the house and looks after the kids, but she also still has to work, why would that entice a woman to actually marry a man? So this is the thing that we're finding as well, is generationally, on the back of our wave of generations, women are going, well, I don't know if I want to get married. I don't know if I want to have kids, right? Which is, of course, impacting the male loneliness epidemic. But this all has a knock-on effect, right? This all has a knock-on effect. And also why I totally and 100% believe why we now have a massive increase of violence against women, and why women's rights are now being questioned, because they need to reestablish a power dynamic, versus understanding that we both still have roles and identities that we can be together with. But when the power shifts, that's when people get afraid, and that's when people try to control and do things.
Yeah.
So,
and because men are driven by different things to women, it's ego and pride and all of that, because that's the way they've been brought up.
Exactly.
You know, and
Exactly.
and a lot of that's not their fault. That's conditioning. And so they've been brought up to believe they have to be the hunter-gatherer. They have to provide for their family. And then they're emasculated by the woman, because the woman can do everything. She doesn't need the man. So
Yeah.
they
And then
become
that's,
surplus
and
to
then her
requirement.
conditioning and his conditioning come together, and then that's when there's issues. Versus, well, why don't we, rather than looking at the conditioning, look at what we actually want the world to look like and how we want relationships to be. It's interesting because you talk about conditioning, but a lot of us don't actually look to where that was and where that came from. But when you actually dig deep into the history, it stems specifically from the 7 deadly sins. That's where it all started, right? That's the rise of the patriarchy there, because that gave us the codex or the step-by-step system to judge morality and judge what is good and bad, and therefore can punish or control, right? So from the 7 deadly sins that were actually published, we then got the Maleficarium, which is all about the witches codex, like when is somebody a witch versus not. And then that became the order of how to spot a witch and kill them, right? So that's when we had tens and tens of thousands of women and some men additionally killed during that time. But it was that conditioning that started that, right? And the conditioning applied to both men and women, by the way. But it was that conditioning that made something either good or bad morally based on the church, based on the patriarchy system. So if we looked at the conditioning of that, like what turns somebody into a good girl, what turns something into a good man, rather than saying, you know, you're a good man if you provide, looking at what it is that's actually needed. That's different, right? What do we need in a relationship? What do we need in a family? What do we need in our community and our society? Versus that's your role, you do that. That's your role, you do that. And if you don't do that, you're bad. And if you don't do that, then you're bad. And that's where we've ended up, pretty much.
It's so interesting. It just made me think about a conversation that I had with my husband and a friend the other day. I might keep this in, or I might take it out. I don't know. We'll see how it lands. But we were in a pub, and we were chatting away, and we were talking about the differences between men and women and the physical need for sex, right? And it ended up being a conversation about language. The reason being
Interesting. Yeah.
that my husband was saying, if a man was to sit in the corner of the pub now,
Yeah.
and wank,
Yeah.
everybody would class him as a pervert. He would be degenerate. He'd be thrown out, beaten up. You know, it would be an awful situation.
Yeah.
If a woman was to sit in the other corner and do the same, all the men would gather around and watch and enjoy it. And it was interesting because my language around that was, if there's a man in the corner having, you know, I can't remember what I said, but it was a bad thing. It was like the way I described it was bad. And when I talked about the woman sitting in the corner, I used the words pleasuring herself.
Ah, okay. Okay.
And there was this really interesting, and he went, and my husband, he's clever. He was like, well, that's interesting because you've just described that in that way. And he put him to have dinners, but you've used words that make it sound like she's doing a good thing, whereas he's doing a bad thing.
So it actually, if you look back to it, right, because again, comes down to the 7 deadly sins, and what we're describing here is lust, but also the value of a woman's body.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not that, you know, having an orgasm wherever you're having it is bad. Right. So there's no wrong or right with the act of that. Where it became wrong or right was our ability to be able to make a choice over when to do it and control ourselves versus not. So impulse control, basically. Yeah. So what actually ended up happening was, and this still happens now today, is that the impulse control of men is put onto women, right? Think about that. So for example, if a man can't control himself and has to have a wank in the middle of the pub, that's because he's being tempted by the woman around him. He's not getting enough sex at home. He's not X, Y, and Z. So his behavior is put on her inability to, or her ability to tempt him to make it like he can't control himself. His impulse control. Right, he provoked her.
Right.
And then for her to do that in public, the reason why they would all gather round is because we've created her body and her pleasuring and the sex element of the lust and control of her body to have value, not her body. And the control of the sex element, the pleasure, the lust, all of that. So it's interesting because it's really not, if you really look at it, that women have value for being just women, right? Under this conditioning, right? We moved away from creation and us being the source and creation because patriarchy had to stop that really quickly because God forbid we should have more power, more creative energy than men. That was too scary for them not to have. So that's why patriarchy were like, no, we need to make it about the man, right? We need to make it about his power. So instead, they made it about her body. So her purity, her ability to overcome her own temptation, her ability to have to control herself, not show skin, dress in a certain way, say the words in certain ways. And then if she does deem herself worthy to sell that part of her body in whatever way, right? So viewing it on OnlyFans, pornography, prostitution, that her value is immediately degraded.
And the reason the conversation came about was because we were talking about the fact that if men, it's a physical need for men and women aren't bothered. Like you can.
Well, that's not actually even true. The reason why we think we're not bothered is because we're terrified. Women are so afraid to do with anything to do with sexuality because of the control of our sexuality. Like if you look back, there's a lot of posturing in certain books that I've read about the divine feminine and working back before patriarchy happened. A lot of sexuality, of mating, of sharing, your hearth, of sharing pleasure was not monitored, wasn't measured, wasn't controlled, and was just something that both sexes enjoyed, whether that be in marriage, in whatever. And in that environment where a woman isn't controlled, maintained, or managed with her sexuality, she can have the same desires, sex drive, etc. than a man does. I know a lot of women that have higher sex drives than their partners, even now. So I don't think that it is sex drive related. I think it's fear. It's fear related. Because for us to say that we're that open sexually, that we are that desirous of things, of wanting to seek pleasure. I know anytime I mention sex on the internet, and I have a program called Sexy Strong, so I mention sex quite a bit, I get way more attention, way more people coming for me, way more people sending things in the DMs, doing anything. And I'm not even a sexologist or any of these people who speak about sex regularly or talk about that, because it's still seen that that's a taboo subject for women to talk about, that how dare we actually want to have a sex drive. I know that I have a higher sex drive than my partner, always have, right? So I don't think I desire sex or have a physical impulse less than him. No, I just think I have to control it. I have to monitor it. I have to be like, am I allowed to be my full expressive, sexually creative, divine energy that I am? Or if I do that right now, am I unsafe? And I think that's truly it. I really do.
It's interesting. And I do think that my Instagram algorithm, because of my age, is peppered with perimenopause. Every other video is a perimenopause video. A lot of them talking about loss of libido and how it's a huge issue. So we're fed this narrative.
We've fed this narrative. Now, in some cases, it's not that you lose your libido. It can be affected, I think is the best way to describe it, because obviously your biology, going back to the biology, is changing, right? Hormones make things changing. But also physically, you can be less, I'm going to say the word moist, I'm really sorry, but you can have things like that happen, right? Or as estrogen really goes down and plummets, that can affect your body's ability to orgasm, for example. So there are changes with what's going on in your body. Also, how you relate to your partner is different. Like my relationship's relatively new. We're only together 18 months. So we're still in the honeymoon phase of like jumping each other like little rabbits. And I'm okay with that, even though I'm deep in the perimenopause. But for me, it's the commercialization of menopause and the medicalization of menopause that I have a trouble with. But when it comes to it's all of it. We're fed, this is what it is. And if you're fed it enough, that's what you believe, right? You're never having sex again. You're never going to orgasm again. You're going to get fat. Everything's going to hurt. You're never going to be the same person you were. Like, and that's what we're fed constantly in that algorithm. And what happens when you see something enough based on neuroplasticity, you believe it.
Well, spirituality is intention. We know that. You have to set the intention. So if you're being fed that and your brain takes it all in and you're internally setting a subconscious intention that this is who I am now, then it will be. You will be. Your mind is the architect of your reality. Whatever you believe is what becomes your
100%. 100%. And it's interesting because I really wanted to go deep into that subconscious stuff, because for me, I was like, yes, I have ADHD, so neurochemistry and neurobiology is really interesting to me because, again, such a nerd. But also, what does that mean for spirituality, consciousness point of view, right? So there's the woo-woo part always coming in. So what I was like, how do I get to the crux of this? Like, what I wanted to answer, and this is probably the crux of all of it, is I know what I need to do. I know kind of what's happening, or I know myself enough. But why can't I do the things that are really good? Like, why can't I make good habits? Why can't I make those good choices? Why can't I follow through? Why can't I achieve whatever that is, right? And that basic disconnect is what I wanted to deep dive into as in relation to that conditioning that we talked about, because all of that conditioning is really why we don't, right? Whether it be, why don't I be free and have multiple orgasms a day? Why does that feel weird for me? Or whatever it might be. Whatever's good for you. Enjoy yourselves, ladies. But it comes down to what I decided to call curses, the 4 curses, because it sounded really, really, really cool. But also I believe that they're curses. And why I think they feel like they're curses is it's almost like a spell that's been put upon you. It's something that's outside of your control that is kind of working in the background, but you can't quite put your finger on it and what it is. So from all that good girl conditioning that we talked about, why we find it hard to find pleasure or lust or greed or pride, you even talked about that, and envy and all of these things as women, they really boil down to 4 key stories that women continue to tell ourselves in a smaller sense. So, and it all kind of falls into this. Now, we could have many of them. Also, men have these curses too, by the way, but women experience them slightly differently. We have the I am not enough curse. Now, what do I mean by that? So I am not enough. How many times do we play things like I am not enough around in our brains every day? So it may come out as, oh, I'm not pretty enough to be on video today, or I am not thin enough to do some video for my business, right? Or I am not confident enough to have a conversation with my boss to ask for that promotion, or whatever it might be. I am not strong enough to have that really, really intense conversation I need to have with my mother-in-law and set some boundaries. Right? We've got one of them. We've all been there, right? But the reason why these curses are so nefarious for us is that, here's some biology. Our brain, it takes up 7% of our overall body mass, something like that, 7 or 8%, but up to 20 to 30% of our overall energy every single day. So this part of us is like the ADHD MacBook or laptop computer. Like, how many tabs do you have open? I actually closed all of mine before I joined our podcast, you've released now. But on average, we're talking 30-ish tabs, 20 to 30 tabs open at any one time, right? So imagine that. And then you've also got all of that like virus scanware that happens on your computer, right? They're scanning for threats, making sure that, nobody's hacking you or whatever. It's the same with our brain. Right? So you've got all those tabs open, mental load, emotional load. You've got your scanning for threats. Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And then you've got the inner mean girl, as I call her, going, who do you think you are? Who do you think? You're not going to be able to talk to your mother-in-law. You're just going to crumble. She's going to say, you just don't treat my son right, or whatever she's going to say. And you're going to crumble and you're not going to be able to do anything about it. But then you're going to walk away from that conversation and we're going to plan the perfect response. I mean, how many hours do we plan the perfect response that we're not even having in that argument? And that's just one of the curses, right? So there's three others, but that's the power of these neurotransmitters, these neuroplasticity. You talked about setting intentions, which is the spirituality element, but the subconsciousness, this is all happening in that subconscious unconsciousness, and that conditioning's all happening in there. And we haven't even brought that to our awareness to be able to go, well, actually, it's time for me to set a boundary, or I need a new habit to replace this, or whatever. So you can see how it feels like we're kind of cursed, right? Sometimes it feels like we're cursed because we're carrying this into every conversation or every kind of scenario. And it's so interesting to me because that's exactly where spirituality is. It's the intention setting. It's us putting in that positive affirmation, or I like to call them enchantments, because spelling, that's why they call it spelling. It's words are magic, but also working with the actual neurobiology and neuroplasticity, because the best thing about midlife, and this is the hope. Would you like some hope? The hope is midlife is the perfect time for us to work with what's happening inside of our brain. We're already really like a sponge for a change of identity, right? We are ready and set for our newest era. Whether you're a Taylor Swift fan and you're like, I'm stepping into a new era, or you're the Madonna fan of reinvent yourself. What color hair are you going to have next? Who knows? But whatever that stage of life you want to step into, this is the perfect time. So you can work with that extra plastic neuroplasticity right now to go, I need to bring some awareness and make some changes. And your body will support that. It's actually easier right now to do that because there's already so much rewiring and reassembly kind of stuff going on, rearranging going on.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, well, I know you've already mentioned it. When we go through these big life events, these big traumatic life events that affect us, we do have to address them. And we do get to this point where if you don't, then it's going to have a negative impact on you end up on this edge of the bed moment. And I know you mentioned a narcissistic friendship, and I don't think people talk about that often enough, because we often hear about narcissistic relationships, husbands, wives, etc., or even parents, narcissistic parents, but we don't talk about those friendships. And you mentioned she was like a sister to you.
Yeah.
And she's actually, is she godmother?
Yes, godmother to my son, and I'm unofficial godmother to hers because God, as a narcissist, she wouldn't make that official. She didn't even invite me to her wedding. Looking back on it now, there were signs. You don't notice these things. But no, we were friends for over 20 years. She was at the birth of my son. I was at the birth of a lot of her children. I looked after her children from they were babies. She had 4. I had 1. I became a babysitter a lot, hence why that became an issue. But it was like a sister because I'd lost both of my parents when we became friends. So she took me in as no, my family's now your family. And that caused a bit of like kerfuffle in her family because they were very close-knit, etc. But they did. But then I always became the thing that they fought over. And looking back on it now, I think she got something out of defending me all the time. Her own sense of superiority, martyrdom, look at me, aren't I saintly, I'm wonderful, that sort of thing. And at the beginning, I didn't see it that way. I just saw it as this is my best friend looking after me. She's helping me. And we went through a lot of different journeys together and a lot of different things and different partners. And because of me, she found her husband, all of that sort of thing. But I did have some red flags that I ignored. And also I didn't know, having lost both of my parents, I didn't have a sounding board to go, is this good behavior in a family? Is this bad behavior in a family? Like, should I be worried? Should I not? I didn't have other things to compare it to or contrast it to until I began having other friends. So what I noticed, first of all, she never had any other friends other than me and her sisters. That should have been a red flag. How we expressed our friendship was we never went out. We never went out, to dinner or for even coffee. It was all in her house. It was always I would come visit. She would make dinner, or she would be like, have a drink here, or we'd be out in the garden. My 40th birthday, she tried to phone 10 minutes before to say she wasn't coming to dinner. And I told her if she didn't turn up, that was it. That was the first time I'd ever made a boundary. with our relationship. And she turned up and that was fine. But then martyred herself by buying bottles of champagne for everybody and, that sort of thing. So interesting. Then when my business set up again, I was working with my clients with a GoFundMe account. She was like, oh yeah, I'll help you with that. But then didn't come along to any of I would have like a thank you for all my fundraiser party and all of these things. Never turned up, never would turn up to anything, never actually show her presence to be like, this is my friend. And then anytime I would go to any of her events with her, interestingly, I remember one time going, can we do a selfie or something? And she took a photo and she went, I was like, oh, that's terrible. And she went, I'm not taking another one. Little things like that you're like, oh, and this is it because I'm starting to shine a little too bright and she doesn't like it. So it was only when I started to have another friend and that other friend was completely different and be like, didn't hold grudges, didn't make an account of any time you spent any money so that we made sure you spent the exact amount of money for every transaction with each other, if that made sense. So weird. Yeah, just like little things. And that became very hard because then our sons are like brothers, basically. So they still are. So when I made that decision to end that was just, I think, before COVID. So having COVID was fine because it gave everybody distance, like when nobody was hanging out. She kept trying to invite me over and all of these things. Oh, come over and we'll rekindle our friendship. I'll do better and all of that sort of stuff. And it was only when I started to really research what narcissists do when you back off that I started to see these patterns. And then I was like, no, I just know. So my good friend and I were like, no, let's have a plan of attack. The boys can still hang out together. You can just pick him up at the end of the driveway. You don't have to go in. You don't have to talk to anybody. And that worked okay until she started to come for my child a little. Like she started to say really horrific things. I'll give you an example. I still think this one's pretty horrendous. They were very rich and well off, which always seems to be the case. With a lot of narcissists, they tend to have that sense of power or entitlement. But they'd just been playing basketball all day. We're in the kitchen grabbing a drink and a snack, her and her son, and turned around to my son and said, are you too poor to shower? To a 16-year-old.
Too poor? Like, how has
that got anything to do with anything? Like, I was like, okay. She also then told my son in front of her son that she didn't believe in any mental health conditions. I don't believe in mental health conditions. I think that's just an excuse. Right? It wasn't long after that I got my ADHD diagnosis, and I do believe that one of her sons is definitely neurodivergent. But like in the end, this then panned out really more difficult in that just as I had my edge of the bed moment, like literally a couple of weeks after that, her son turned up at my door and was like, I need to leave. I need to leave. I need some space. I need to stay somewhere. And I was like, well, you can stay here for a week until you get something sorted or you're doing something. And that became the most horrific week because one, I was really sick. I was getting iron transfusions. I was trying to get myself back on track. I was financially, I had no job at that time. There was no money coming in. I was just looking after my son. He had a job, so he was kind of looking after us to a certain extent. He was 18 at that point, been working as a chef for 2 years and actually earning quite well. So it was okay. And then he turned up and then suddenly my son is trying to pay for me and him. And it was really hard. And this was a family that was multimillionaire status family. And when he turned up at the door, I was like, I spoke to the dad. He's my good friend. So I spoke to her husband and was like, I'm not communicating with her, but I'll communicate with you because I don't want him to be estranged from his family. That's never my intention. But if he needs some space and he needs to figure some things out as a teenage boy who his mother is saying that needs to go and get committed because he was disagreeing with her. It was a lot. Like she turned up at my door going, I really think that he needs to go get some serious therapy and serious whatever. And I'm like, he just needs some space right now. He just needs to be a boy. He just needs to be a teenager. And that doesn't mean like going out and doing crazy things. It just means he just needs to figure himself out a bit. He just needs a bit of space, not to be like, he felt like he could never say anything. He could never express himself. He could never express an opinion. He couldn't have a differing opinion to anybody. It was just very, very, very difficult. And then other things came to light, but those were the worst ones. And also if you're having mental issues, like he had really bad OCD, he still does, but I don't know if he's clinically diagnosed with OCD, but he had a lot of OCD behaviors, like very controlling based behaviors. And again, I was like, how did you not see this? Like, how can you not see that this is there's something neurodivergent going on, that he might need extra help and support and he needs something, but yet you can't say that to somebody who doesn't believe in mental health or mental disabilities, right? It's like, what? So anyway, they turned up at my door every single day, banging on the door, wanting to see him, wanting to do this. And I'm like, I can't do this. But not once did they say, how is he? It's, I want to see him. I miss him. I want this. I want that. Not how is he? Not once was I offered shopping, food, right? The only thing I was offered was protein powder, because I had loads of it, and an air mattress that was this big for him to sleep on. For 2.5 years, he stayed with me, just over 2
my
years.
God.
And he slept in this room on the floor in a mattress like that. But during that whole time, I never got 1 penny from them to and I wouldn't have probably have taken the money, but there was no offer. He didn't want anything. He was like, everything that they give me comes at a cost, comes beholden to something else. And I don't want to be beholden. I just want some time, some space. And I just said, give him 2 weeks with no interaction just till he sorts himself out. 2 weeks. And just think of him like he's on holiday. No, they couldn't. They just doubled down, stalked him outside of this house. They tried to catch him on the road. That it was just, it was.
And he was 18, was he, at this point?
He was 16. He just about to turn 17. He turned 17 when he was here. So he was out of the system. He could live on his own at that point, because I looked up the legal elements of it, and could they come for you legally? No, it was the answer. But at one point we tried to get benefits for him because he didn't have a job or anything. Nope, that wouldn't work either.
But still, I mean, obviously nobody would like to think that their child's going to run away and go and live with someone else. But the fact is that
it was me.
Of all the people, yeah.
I was his aunt. He called me auntie, like I am his aunt.
It's a safe space. And we all know, don't we, that teenagers often relate to other adults better than they relate to their own parents. And I wouldn't be happy about it if my boys disappeared, but at least I knew where he was.
Where he was. And also, I was speaking to them every single week. We met for coffee, and I would speak to the dad and be like, okay, I'm happy to keep this communication open. This is what's been going on. But then I was also giving them information of, okay, he's got himself a wee part-time job, and they would turn up at his workspace. They would never once ask how he was. Like, every communication never started with, so how is he doing? How's the job? Is he enjoying working? It was, I don't believe he's actually working. It was just so weird. It was so weird. And I don't know whether because of the narcissism elements, it was almost like it became a competition or something, or like, how dare you win or something. And I'm like, I don't believe me. I haven't won. Like, this is financially causing me to the point where I might lose my house. We may all have to move in somewhere because I don't have the ability to feed your son and my son and pay the bills right now. And yet you're knocking on the door saying that you miss him. Brilliant. Sending photos, family photos writing 13-page double-sided letters to a 16-year-old son. That was all about her. It's so interesting.
It's the hero or the victim mentality of the narcissism, isn't it? They either have to be saving the day or poor me. And actually, in that scenario, it wasn't about them. It was about him. And so do you still have a good relationship with him?
Yes. So he eventually moved out, and he now lives with his girlfriend. And I saw him last week, I think. So we still have dinner. And my son sees him and speaks to him every single day. He's still his brother. He calls him his brother. They are brothers. Like, he couldn't continue to sleep on the floor. And I was like, there was a part of me going, I don't want to make the space super duper comfortable for you at the same time, because I do want you to eventually know that this is temporary, but I want you to still feel cared for. And it was that delicate balance of going, you're safe here, but also you need to make a plan, right? There needs to still be a plan in place. Considering it was supposed to be 2 weeks, then I said 3 months, and then it was 2 bloody years later. But they learned a lot of life skills, right? And that's what I wanted. I wanted to feel like there was life skills learned. There was the biggest dollop of reality that somebody had come from a very privileged background to sleeping on the floor. But the fact that they did, and they went to work and they went to the gym and they learned to make food for themselves, learned to do their own laundry and all of that sort of stuff. So it was, I know that sounds really silly, but those are the skills that I was like, that passes him on to becoming an adult, to be able to earn money for themselves, look after a household, keep themselves clean, keep the house clean. He looked after the dog a lot as well, which again, it wasn't like it was giving him tasks. It was like, here's life admin. This is what we all do. Yeah.
Do you have any contact with his parents anymore?
No. I think we stopped that when I realized it wasn't actually helpful. We used to have the occasional person come to the door, like his grandmother, for example. Again, I never wanted anybody to think that they couldn't call by, but I wanted to set boundaries. So I was very much like, this is the boundary that they want, and I'm going to uphold that for them because that's what they've asked me to do. It's not that I would ever hold somebody at bay. I would be like, let me have a communication with them, find out what they're comfortable with, and then maybe we'll create a space that we can all go together and have coffee, or we can go in a neutral space together, right? So that's the sort of thing. But at the beginning, I understand why they would just want some space. Like, give them a week, give them a couple of weeks. But no, and then I would say, well, now it started again. There's the timer started again for 2 weeks. That 2 weeks took nearly 6 weeks to get, because they couldn't just be understanding that they just needed a little bit of space. It's just like the same as them going away on holiday or going away for, I don't know about you, but I was sent to, when I was younger, went up to stay with an aunt and our grandparents and had time away from the family for a little bit, like a summer or whatever. That's how it could have been thought of. They just need some space. They just need some time. And I think that that's where the damage was done. I think not acknowledging that they had and needed some space, and not acknowledging that they had boundaries. There's no trust. That's how you build trust, right? Is saying something and then upholding what you're going to say. So
Well, interesting that by the time your child got to that age, they do have some free will. Grief does things to us that we're not really aware of. I've lost both my parents in the last 18 months, and
it's something like that.
Thank you. But, you lost yours at 22, and it's
within a year of each other. Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. Mine was 11 months apart, and nothing can prepare you for that in any way, shape or form. I know you mentioned you lost people during COVID as well. So there's additional grief on there. And you also mentioned that there was a cult of types involved.
Yeah. So there was just so much going on for that. Like, I would say from the age of about 46. So I had a very successful business at that point, a fitness business. I had my own studio. I was teaching 16 plus strength-based classes for women. I was in the best shape ever. To a certain extent, I kept getting injured because I was pushing myself too hard, the usual. And for me, COVID actually came as a blessing, because I could finally go, no, I want to switch this to a completely online program. Because I was stuck, right? I couldn't really take a lot of time away because people were paying me monthly, all of that sort of stuff. So I'd created a business that also made me feel trapped. So at the beginning of COVID, it actually made me feel more free, which was ironic because towards the end of it, I felt even more trapped. But it was during that time that it was almost like the waves. I think COVID happened in waves, which probably also happened with my estrogen as well, was that it was good, right? I didn't mind being at home. I got to spend time with my son. I got time to spend time with my dog. I was still working with clients. I was doing workouts in my living room and filming them. The weather was gorgeous. We were out. We were doing beautiful things to our house. I was making a lot of money. I became very successful. My programs were selling really well. It was all great. And then I hit this wall of, okay, I now have all the success, but I've no way to enjoy it, because you couldn't go out, you couldn't go on holiday, there was no point buying a nicer car. I didn't feel like I could celebrate, and also I didn't want to be like, look at me, I'm doing great, and everybody else is, I don't know. There was so much that made me then feel trapped, and then that was the part of the decline. So at that point, then a good friend of mine, she became my COVID buddy. I had a best friend who we used to go on hot girl walks with. And then I had another girl who was also working from home, who was a hypnotherapist. and she became my COVID buddy. So when we were allowed to leave the house a little bit, we would go for coffee, or we'd go for a drink, or we'd go for some food. And that became like our little, making us feel like we could express ourselves in the world. And I also had a coach who was in my studio who I used to work out with together as well. So then at the start of COVID, the coach, I think she did take her own life as an effect of that. She was already having really bad. She was due to actually leave to go to Canada and start a new life, and she was all excited about that. And then COVID stopped her, and that was just too much. I think, too much of a curveball. So that happened, and I didn't process it at all. I acknowledged it on social media because I had to, because she was part of that, and I just move on, just keep going. And then towards the middle of COVID, I started to get these calls and stuff from production companies and all of these trying to reach out to me saying, did you know that this organization you were part of, he's now been arrested. There's been some weird things going on. And I hadn't been involved with them for maybe about 5 years at this point, perhaps, though interestingly, my friend had. And so I was like, I don't know what's going on. And then I started to see that there was TV series being made, that there was other things being put out there, and I was being bombarded by more. And I was trying to process this. Then there was a full legal process that was happening, and there was court notes and everything started to come up. So I was working with my friend who was the hypnosis, going, I don't know what to do. Should I talk to somebody or whatever? And that's when I started to talk to somebody else. I also have a podcast and a book. So this happened smack bang right in the middle of COVID, when we were all deep in our darkest.
But when had you been a member of was it a church?
No. It was a personal development organization.
Oh, right.
So
okay.
this was about 15 years ago, 15.
Right.
And then I was on and off with them, or at least with contact with people who were in the community. And I hadn't really had any communications for about 5 years.
Okay.
And then when all this started to happen, I still was Facebook friends with people. I still was good friends with a lot of people. And my friend who I was estranged from at that time was still connected.
Okay.
So that just made things really difficult. So I had reached out to somebody to go, I don't know what's happening, what's going on. And it had the same effect that I now felt when I read the Epstein files on my person, when I started to read what was going on, right? It was just horrific. I was like, what the hell? Because for me, it was like having a really good experience of something, right? And thinking that it was really good and positive, and then somebody telling you something horrific about that, and that you had kind of survived or swerved and didn't end up having that happen to you. So it had a little bit of almost like a survivor's guilt or a element to that, because I wasn't involved when it started to go really horrific, or I wasn't aware of what was happening. So it was very much like, or somebody described it once as like being in a relationship, getting a divorce, and then finding out that person was a something.
An adulterer or a serial cheater or whatever.
Right? So although you knew nothing and the relationship was good and everything was okay, and your experience of that, but yet afterwards, and that's the feeling that I found really difficult, because I had nobody to really talk to about it. I didn't know whether my feelings were valid because it didn't happen to me. So then when I spoke to my friend and contact who was one of the whistleblowers that ended up causing the whole thing to happen, and now has the book and podcast and everything, she was the one that helped me, because I was like, I don't know what to feel about this. And she goes, you know what? You're exactly how a lot of my clients feel about it, because she'd brought a lot of people into this organization. And she's like, a lot of them didn't have any of the negative stuff that I have felt and been through. They all just had positive, because I'd looked after them and it was helpful and beneficial to a lot of people. But they don't know what to feel about it too. So the best way is for me to connect you with them, and you can all be there for each other and everything. So that was really good. But it was such a weird experience, because how do you quantify that? Like, because I didn't have a bad experience, but yet there were people in this, of course, me being me, because I can't help myself. I was reading the court's transcribes of what was going on and what was being said and all of these things. because I had to know, like I had to know what actually had happened, like what's true and what's real, because obviously these documentaries that were happening are still going to be dramatized and whatever. So yeah, that was a really dark, that's really bad, sick feeling for a lot of it, and hard to talk about with anybody, right? It's like, hi, I was in a thing that now turns out to be a sex cult, and I don't know what that means. So,
But I mean, I've actually had other people on my interview with Peter Greedy, and he said he didn't realize it was religious, but he was recruited at university, and it was just, it was called Antioch, and it's actually the one that The Handmaid's Tale was based on.
Oh.
So he didn't know until he left. And then he went back.
I had a very interesting moment of when I actually ended up leaving, is that I got banned from going to the United States from a visa issue. And I was working at that time bringing the Dalai Lama to New York. So I was working with monks, believe it or not, to bring them and to bring these people together. And I truly believe that if I hadn't have had that intervention, which I thought was the end of my life, at that point I was like, this is it. I was so depressed and felt like this was the end of the world, right? And yet that was the event that actually ended up probably saving me from being one of the people more grimly affected, because I was so in the community. And I remember having a conversation with my friend, and she was like, yeah, if both of us hadn't at that point, because she left just after I left, and she was like, I think we probably would be in a different place right now. And I was like, damn, like that's a really interesting sliding doors type of moment. But interestingly, then not long after that, it was like boom, 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 ADHD diagnosis not long after that. And then my friend who was the hypnotherapist got diagnosed with bowel cancer. And then she passed not long after that. So it was just like, so
many different things.
And then I had some really bad financial things happen. And then that's also what happened with the edge of the bed moment. So it was just like, from about the middle of COVID, so 2021 till about 2023, it was just the, it was like the biggest, darkest cloud.
Do you know why you were banned from going into America?
Oh, it was just a visa issue. You know what?
Oh, just a visa thing. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But, again, talking about that was like horrific, but it was just, it was a paperwork issue. It was insane.
But again, all of this compounds, doesn't it? No wonder you felt like you were carrying armor.
I actually say none of it was processed. None of it was like I was trying to do the right thing and talk to somebody or do this, but then that costs money to get a therapist, or you speak to your doctor and then your doctor takes friggin' 3 months to even get you anywhere to talk to. So then you talk to somebody else about. So, that's when I also created a podcast, because hello, that's sometimes what you just need to get out what you want to talk about in the world. And then now, I've written the book. So the first book just flew out of me because I'm armored. Yes, unarmored is the unarmoring process. So when I thought about Armour Weight, I was like, well, what did I do to live more unarmored, right? To start to take the armor off. Now, when I say that to some people, they're like, no, but I need some of my armor. And I do believe the world is a place where we may need to keep some of our armor. And I'm not saying I want you naked in a field. I'm trying to say that some of this is not serving you and it's really not helping you. And we need to bring that balance together, the wellness alchemy triquetra, as I call it, the psychology, biology, and spirituality, and bring that together. And then I started like nervous system regulation. I understand that was a missing piece for me. And that's been really helpful. So talk therapy would never work for me because I talk and it doesn't get me anywhere. So I knew I needed something that was embodied as well. So I used those tools specifically and understood them. And that was a really interesting process. And that felt really good because obviously as I was writing the book, I was unarmoring and talking about it. And it felt really, really lovely. And then I decided that it was a really good idea to write a book that was basically the origin story of the armor.
Okay.
Why would you do that to yourself? So why would you write a book about all the horrible, horrible things that have happened to women throughout many, many hundreds and thousands of years of why we feel the need to armor? That would be me. But I think it's because it was cathartic, right? It really was. And in some ways, it felt cathartic that I was like, I felt like I was processing for sure, but also, oh, that's why I do that. That's why I think this. That's why. So there was like an understanding element of why.
And that's how your brain works, isn't it?
Yeah,
Everything that happens is, but why?
but why?
Why?
But why?
Why?
And then there becomes like a righteousness for my rage. I needed a righteousness. I needed a understanding that this rage, that yes, a lot of it's hormonal and menopausal, and I'm okay with that. But also there's a reason why. There is a reason why, right? And our buffer and our bullshit buffer is gone in midlife. Estrogen's seen to that, right? And then now we have, as you spoke to earlier, that we now have the ability to go, I'm not okay with that anymore. That's not okay. No, I can't, not taking that anymore. I'm not listening to that anymore, whatever it is. But I also needed to know the why. I also needed to know the journey. And also there's a sense of honoring, there's a sense of remembering that gives everything that's happened up until now a validity in our existence now as women. It also speaks a little to what I called ancestral armor weight, right? Why we have difficulty speaking up. We call that the witch wound. Why visibility can feel so hard. Why when we speak the truth and express our emotions, that can be really difficult. To any of the other wounds that we may have, abandonment wound, mother wound, father wound, all the different wounds that rise as a respect of that. But also, like when I heard about things from like this year alone, Epstein files, Rape Academy, the increase of domestic violence, sexual violence for women, where I live, Northern Ireland, is having increased lots of rape and sexual violence towards women, which is really difficult. All of these things, and I felt, and also our rights beginning to be eroded as women and our reproductive rights. I felt like maybe there needs to also be a bit of a call to arms for women. And how can women who don't want to be involved with what's on the news, how can we feel like we can make a difference, right? How can we do that, right? And whether that, I don't want you necessarily to get your placards out or burn any bras, ladies, you'll be pleased to know. But what can activism look like for you, right? What can inner activism maybe look like for you? What can we do to make different choices? What can we do to, stand up for what we do believe, or understand what true embodied feminism is? Because if embodied feminism is the definition of loving women, that has to start with us loving ourselves, right? Self-love, right?
Yeah.
So self-love and the love and support of other women, right? And if that is what embodied feminism is, what does inner activism look like? How can I love myself more? How can I then believe in women more? How does that have the ripple effect of what we're looking for? Because the moments that matter the most are when you are called to put your own will and your own voice to be heard. That could be sitting in the GP surgery when you need to ask for help, and ask because you're like, I might need hormones, I might need HRT, I might need something, and I need to speak up. And medical misogyny might be going, nope, you don't, and you have to be able to stand your ground. But that also might be where somebody says, this happened to me, and instead of us going, no, I don't believe you, we believe. How can I support you? How can we change the system? How can we have this not happen again?
You see, I believe that we were taught for years not to listen to ourselves, to our intuition. And we know that we are in the Great Awakening. We are. The world is waking up again, right? And that means that women are waking up. They're listening to their intuition. They're listening to themselves. And we're not ignoring that inner voice anymore.
We're not.
And for me, that's the key. It's listening to yourself. And we don't. We've spent years and years and years just that little voice going, maybe you shouldn't do that. Or maybe you should do this today. And we just go, no, because I'm really busy and I've got to do this and I've got to do that and I've got to do this.
And I think we also have a problem discerning between the inner mean girl and that inner knowing voice or the intuition voice.
Yeah.
And I think that's the conditioning versus intuition. And I think that a lot of us, is we don't spend the time to do that sort of the work, but also know that that's enough. I think sometimes we think it doesn't matter unless I'm out there with the placards or I'm out on social media calling out the bad people or doing the whatever. And I think that that's great if you have the capacity to do that, if you are, that's your mission, that's your purpose, that's what you want to do. But for some of us, just being able to do the work, I call it the witch work, believe it or not, that it's the doing the work to work out what's the difference between inner mean girl and inner knowing. How do I tap into that intuition? But also dismantle the conditioning from the who am I, who am I down in here? But also that feminism, that embodied feminism. Can I love myself more? How can I love myself more? How can I perpetuate the love of women? Because if misogyny is the hate of women, we need that counter force to be like, no, I love women. I love me. I want to perpetuate this love and support and this equality, this energy of women once more. And I think that that's what we can do. And I like to think of it as, and this is the hope I'm going to spread for you, is I see myself in the world as this pagan matriarch. This pagan matriarch is someone who lives in nature, understands the cycles of nature and of the earth, who lives in cycle and cyclical living, who understands that menopause, like motherhood, like puberty, is just a part of a woman's experience and the cycles that she goes through, the woman's life cycles. I also see that I have impact as a leader, as someone within my community whose voice and wisdom can be passed down, can be used for the betterment of the whole community. That the leadership, that the sense of being the role model, of being that wise, whether that be the crone, whether that be the guardian within our communities, can actually think about the community and differently. You know, women will think about, how does this affect all of these things? Women will think 7 generations from now, if I make this decision, how does that affect that? And then we create the villages we want, that creates the village to look after our children, to look after our elderly, to look after those that are disabled or not able, right? And then that's where we could live, where the community reflects that, right? And it's built out of that. So that's the vision of the world that I think we can begin to create with just one little decision, little decision at a time.
And you've created your warrior goddess archetypes, haven't you? I know you've got seeker, warrior, guardian, alchemist. And I think it's really interesting that you've created this language and this framework around what you've created, because it gives us the words, doesn't it, to explain how we feel, and it validates those feelings, because we can put ourselves into a framework and then explore around that, right?
Yes. And I think sometimes that's what's missing, is that can feel very overwhelming, especially midlife, right? Because there's so much going on. And as you say, we don't really stop. We don't really ponder. We don't really reflect or spend that time doing that. And it's also some of that can feel a bit scary. It can feel a bit like, oh, I don't know if I want to dive in there. Whereas when I don't know about you, but I'm a romantasy type person. I love me a good fairy, I call it fairy porn book, where it's like the worlds and there's the different kind of visions of what the world can be. And then there's warrior fairies and things. And I feel like I'm not trying to live in a fantasy land here, but what I am trying to do is bring that sense of kind of fun and vision and mysticism and mythical kind of ideas. Because if you think about it, in a lot of these books that are written, the women are very strong female leads, right? But they're also avatars, and they're also characters, and they're also embodiment of different characteristics and all of that sort of thing, right? If you were to play, if this was a video game, you get to pick your avatar and you get to pick what she's wearing and you get to pick her cute little wings and all of these sorts of things, right? And I'm not equating life to a video game, but what I'm saying is that can make it more interesting. That's what magic is like, what do I want to see in this world?
Life is a choice.
And it's a choice. You know, it's like, did you ever have choose your own adventure books when you were younger?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it felt like.
I mean, Lisa, I think we could talk for hours and hours and hours, you and I. I think we'd never stop. The books,
Yes.
So They are both available now? No,
They're both available, yes, for ebook download. We're getting close to getting them published on Amazon, but I've got them for ebook download, nice and easy for everybody to access them at this point. We've got Unarmored and we've got Burned, which is like the prequel or the origin story. You can just get all of that on my website if you go to the Warrior Goddess Saga, saga.com. And you don't need W's, it's just the warriorgoddesssaga.com. And you'll find the books in there. You can also find us on Instagram at the Warrior Goddess Saga. And you can come into our saga whatever way feels good from the books. I have an oracle, I have the quiz and the archetypes. There's something for everybody on their own saga, on their own journey. And that's what I wanted it to be.
Amazing. I think it's fantastic that you've created this whole world around it. And it's just so lovely. I'll make sure all those links are in the show notes, obviously. And Lisa, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Like I said, I think we've gone on for hours.
So much fun.